Sabrina and Freeland Tanner are a couple so passionate about plants that they decided to stop and smell the roses. All 350 of them.
We had too many roses in the garden. We were rose poor.
The story of the garden and the gardeners, next on A Gardener's Diary.
I found a garden in California's Napa Valley that was the realization of a dream for Sabrina and Freeland Tanner. As young executives, they were under a lot of stress and longed for something else in life. They found it by dropping out of the corporate world and going back to their roots, literally by moving to Freeland's family home and creating their own garden together, right in the middle of a prune orchard.
I grew up here as a child, playing in the prune orchard in the fields, picking prunes, and my mother raised me in the little house up front there, and it was a great place to grow up.
Your garden has a very spacious feel. You've got these curving boxwood that really enclose the beds, and then little views. I get glimpses through trees and the structures. It feels so vast.
Well, thank you. It's sort of a trick I had to use because the lot is 400 by 100. It's a long cracker box, and so I wanted to make it seem larger.
And it does indeed. So that's a little different. Usually you think of them as linear.
That's correct, like the French parterres and so forth, but this is sort of an asymmetrical format of that concept. The garden was originally designed to house a collection of 350 heirloom and old garden roses.
350?
Yes, we collected them for a number of years. We had them all in containers, as a matter of fact, before we moved here and built the house and garden.
So you started out with roses, 350 roses, and
yes.
Well, you've done so much more than that.
Well, it was great in the spring when they were all blooming, but a lot of them were once bloomers. And when they weren't blooming, I was looking at a whole lot of green foliage. And so we introduced a collection of conifers for stability during the winter and grasses for movement, and one thing led to another, and now it's become more of a foliage garden than actually a flower garden.
This weeping Norway spruce is very sculptural, and the hosta juxtapose the leaves, the contrast, and that is a really spectacular hosta. The leaves are sort of pleated almost.
The name of that hosta is Eola Sapphire Blue, and it's one of the largest blue hostas you can get. And it's almost like a sculpture, you know, it's sort of like a kinetic sculpture in that the conifer is like a waterfall, and the hosta is almost like the turbulence of the waters below it. And this one really just gets bigger every year.
It's just a feast for the eyes.
Well, thank
everywhere
you.
I look.
I think a key to successful garden design is that, you know, some areas of the garden are hidden from view, and there's these secret things that emerge, and the garden sort of unfolds as you walk through it.
You don't see it all at once.
Exactly right.
But you sure can't wait to get to the next spot.
That's exactly right. It draws you in.
Although the garden started out as a showcase for the Tanner's Rose collection, it soon evolved into a lush tapestry of colors and textures so beautiful that friends started begging the Tanners to help them with their gardens. Now Freeland and Sabrina are professional garden designers, making a living at what they love best.
Gardening has always been a passion and a hobby. And I went back to school and learned accounting and small business practices so I could run that part of the business. My husband went back to school and did more drafting work on the computer. So it just kind of blossomed into something that we really love. And we spent a lot of time and energy developing all the financial part to make that work. And the creative part just seemed to flow.
Combining plants in the garden is, for a lot of people, it's a daunting task. They don't know which tree to put with which shrub. And you and Freeland have done that so beautifully here in this garden. How did you start?
Well, we started by trying to develop some structure in the garden because we actually started building the garden in February of '88.
So almost 16 years.
Correct.
Wow. Well, when you started this garden, were there trees here, or what was it? Was it a clean slate? Was it an empty lot? What? I know there's
I wish
a
it was
story.
a clean slate. It was an overgrown blackberries, old decrepit walnut trees. There was a few oaks on the driveway which are still here that Freeland's grandfather had planted many years ago. And so we had to build up from there. Decided instead of square and rectangular lawns and planting beds, we wanted to do curves.
Curving lines like this. This is a beautiful curve, and it opens up to this big space, so you really, your eye gets a little rest. And this Flomus is such a good doer, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a great performer in the Napa Valley.
And it performs well outside the Napa Valley. That's what I like about it.
That's great.
It does well in Georgia. I don't know if it gets quite this robust, but this rose looks like a relative of Ballerina.
Yes, it's Marjorie Fair, and the color stays very crisp and clean even in this warm climate. So it's a real good performer all the way through Christmas time.
Really? It
Yes.
keeps blooming. Do you deadhead?
A couple times a year, but then I get flowers through Christmas.
Beautiful, beautiful color combinations, but Freeland said you had sort of a trick to take away from the distraction of color. You recommend taking...
Take black and white still photos, and really you can see the strong and the weak points of the garden.
so the color doesn't distract you.
That's right.
But it's hard not to get seduced by all this color right now.
Well, that's the icing on the cake.
Coming up, how to get the maximum effect out of a minimal space. And later, how to choose colors for your garden chairs without a paint chip.
As I toured Sabrina and Freeland Tanner's Napa Valley garden, it was hard for me to believe that their property was less than an acre. The long, skinny lot ran along one side of their driveway. But until you enter through a rustic arbor, you would never guess at all the wonders that lay ahead. Freeland, we're standing at this entrance here. This is an entrance to the garden. And this wonderful structure made out of, it looks like, I don't know what type of
Willow and
willow.
different branches. It's an old hurdle, it was what they call it.
A hurdle. I never heard
It's
that
an old
term.
English term.
And it's actually anchored into the boxwood hedge here.
Yeah, we actually put that in first and then planted the hedge around it.
This magnificent display of clematis clambering up into the tricolor beech.
Yes, well, it's a color tone on tone here with a large and a smaller flowered form and picking up that color that's on the leaf margins of the beech.
What variety is this?
This is Niobe.
Niobe?
This other one here is Madame Julia Coravon.
They're both so perfect, and you can really appreciate the color of the beech here.
Yes,
And then
yes.
your eye jumps over to that red banana.
Yes, yes.
The Tanner's Garden is full of destination spots that lure you with their inviting views. Even the smallest spot is worth exploring. A lot of people have very small spaces to garden in, and they feel really challenged by that. They think, well, I just can't do that. I don't have a big garden. But this is a very small part of your garden, and there's so much going on with the foliage, the stone juxtaposed to the boxwood hedge,
Yes.
and the containers, the fence. You've really got all the details right here in this one small area.
Well, this kind of concept can be used in any size of a garden, actually. And what we've done here is we've used a bold texture with the eucomis down here at the bottom. And then we've got the spirea, the golden spirea
The
here.
ogon,
Yes. And then we've got Caryopteris, Worcester gold, I believe, is that right?
I think that's right.
Yeah, and then we've got this Lysomachia ciliata down in here, and the dark foliage of that's going to come up, rise, and it's going to have the yellow flowers, which will create the nice color echo with these two golden plants and tie the composition together.
And this rose,
Yeah.
this wonderful red
Isn't that
rose with
great?
the chartreuse, I wouldn't have thought of that, but I like the
Right.
chartreuse with the red.
Well, you know, the chartreuse, as long as you've got some purple values in here and you're using a true blue red, which is real crisp and clean, almost a blood red, if you will, then you can mix these things together and they don't look too badly.
And this rose is...
This rose is Chevy Chase. It's a miniature rose, but miniature in no means as to how large it can get. It's a once bloomer, but blooms for several months, 2 months, I would say.
Wow.
Quite a long time. Nice, clean foliage, pretty much disease resistant. And I've just trained it along the fence there, and it continues to go.
Another destination spot was created out of a need to escape the summer heat. We're standing underneath a sort of, to me it feels like a summer house, a small version of a summer house with a lattice and the arched roof.
Yes, Freeland built this. It was the first structure in the garden. We were working out here and there was no trees here, and so we needed a place to take a break and cool off from the afternoon heat.
Tucked away here, it's almost like a little secret you come upon. This chartreuse combination is just, it's chartreuse in green.
Yes, it is.
This is gorgeous here. Is this a Petasites?
Yes, that one's called Golden Palms.
Golden palms. But I thought Petasites was pretty invasive.
They're quite invasive, and how we got around that was we actually sunk it in the ground in a plastic pot with drain holes, and so it can stay in the confines of that pot and not travel elsewhere.
So that's one way to deal with overly aggressive plants.
Exactly, but if you know, it's got beautiful foliage, so we really like it here.
And that's why you grow it.
Yes.
Petasites golden palms. Looks so good with morphomas and the grasses and barberry, which I don't like, but I like this color.
Yeah, it's a great plant for color and fall interest too.
Now, this is a very heavily planted thing. So there's not a lot of space. Does that help cut down on your maintenance?
Very much so. It keeps the weeds at bay, and also we don't have to water as much because the plants keep each other protected from the heat.
So that's a good tip for not only California gardeners, but in lots of places.
Yes.
Wow, look at this. I love, that's a tender plant. A
Yes.
tender pelargonium or geranium.
Yeah, that's Geranium Vancouver Bicentennial.
Ooh.
And because it's tender, we left it in a pot so I can bring it in, you know, under an arbor for the winter time and save it.
In your case, you just have to put it under where it's slightly more protected.
Exactly, exactly.
Bicentennial, what is it?
Vancouver Bicentennial.
I like that.
When we return, choosing paint colors for your garden ornaments is easy. Just consult Mother Nature.
Get a taste.
As I wandered through the curving paths of Sabrina and Freeland Tanner's garden, I was delighted with new vistas everywhere I turned. Although it looked perfectly planned, Sabrina assured me it had gone through quite an evolution.
Started out more of a English formal garden, but then I think it became more Pacific Northwest, where there's a lot of different colors of foliage, chartreuse, burgundy, silvers, a lot of perennials and grasses and big-leafed foliage plants. So it has more of a lush feeling rather than a drier California look.
I don't know what color blue you'd call this, but it's certainly a brilliant blue.
We call it celestial blue.
We're sort of in another open lawn area.
Yes, this is our east lawn, and it's
East
summer
lawn.
planting border.
Well, spring has not been neglected, though.
No,
You've got
it
these
hasn't.
incredible delphiniums that match the color of the chairs.
Yes, we did that on purpose so that
I knew that. How did you match the color of the delphinium flower to the color of the obelisk and the chairs?
well, we basically took some petals in of the flowers and took them to the paint store and found a color that matched.
So you match your flowers to the paint.
Yes, we like to have paint colors and flower colors work together. It's a nice surprise.
And the repetition of the same color, you've done that a lot with your garden with chartreuse and burgundies and forms. You do a lot of repetition.
Yes, because it links the garden together, makes it make more sense to the viewers and people who are enjoying the garden.
And the delphiniums are just, they all need to be staked because they're so big. Those are those Pacific hybrids.
Right, and we get
Giants.
the winds through here as you're seeing today, and we certainly want to have our flowers as long as possible. So we stake them to keep them up.
And the cardoon foliage is a nice contrast,
It's
that silvery.
Beautiful. Even in Christmas time, that plant's beautiful.
And you've got another evergreen anchor here with the picea.
Yes, that was one of our living Christmas trees that we had many years ago in the house, and we brought it out here and planted it in the garden.
So it's got sentimental value.
Yes, it does.
Freeland showed me another small area near the driveway that was rich with texture. What do you call this area in here with, starts out with this gigantic hosta?
We call it tapestry border because it's a mix of low and medium-sized plants that are kind of woven together in different ways in a textural kind of
Very textural. You've got, looks like an echeveria.
echeveria, the common hens and chicks there.
Oh, just beautiful, beautiful. So this probably looks good all year round.
The ladies' mantle does go down in the winter a bit, but you can come out here and really see pretty much the same thing year-round. Right now you're seeing sort of purple foliage color, pinkish and magenta flowers, but then later in the year the grasses really get even more orange, and then we have a lot of peach and apricot flowering things in here. So
Look at that. Look at the colors. This even has a little bit of this color right in there. And is this its natural color?
that's its natural color.
That's an echeveria?
Echeveria, yes.
And Freeland, it looks as if the soil has been built up here. Is that right?
Yes, it's actually been, we've created kind of a little undulating berm here
Is
to
that for
showcase.
drainage?
It's for drainage, and where the echeverias and the succulents basically are. We've made it sort of lean and mean, if you will, by mixing in a lot of gravel and sand into the soil. So that it drains very quickly, it's not too rich, and during the winter they're not going to rot out, because that's one of the worst things that you can have happen. A lot of these plants are great in a pot, but not so great in the ground. unless you live in a very sandy soil situation.
So the soil typically here in Napa and California would be
Well, heavy clay
heavy.
for the most part.
It almost has a Mediterranean feel.
That's exactly right,
with
yes.
the hardy geraniums,
Yes, Geranium cantabrigianense there.
and that looks
And a
like an
little-
ice plant.
It's a senecio, yes.
Oh, it's a senecio.
Yes, it's a
Okay.
senecio.
Grasses and
Phlomis there, and
that's a phlomis.
that's a Phlomis tuberosa.
with a lavender
yeah,
flower.
Phlomis tuberosa, the
Wow.
tuber Phlomis.
And the 9-bark.
Yeah, that's a Physocarpus diablo. A fairly recent introduction, I would say, last couple years.
I have to just step over
Oh,
to
yeah,
look
go
at that
ahead.
flower.
Yeah, that's actually the berries that are left from the flower.
And the foliage looks great.
Foliage is very nice on that plant. It does go deciduous, but then I have the Italian cypress there to kind of pull the whole composition together there and give a vertical element to interrupt all the billowing shapes that are occurring in this location.
So much happening in one little area.
Yeah, exactly.
A mouth-watering garden that's as beautiful as it is functional. When we return.
HGTV's new series, Get Out.
As I explored Sabrina and Freeland's California garden, I was teased by glimpses through arbors of another garden that looked particularly alluring. Or maybe I was just getting hungry. It seems appropriate that you would have a grape arbor here in the Napa Valley, because
Yes.
this is where we're in the wine country.
That's correct. Yeah.
And do you actually harvest these grapes
Yes,
from your garden?
yes.
Do you
and-
press your own wine barefoot?
No,
you
no,
and
no, no,
Sabrina?
no. This is purely table grapes. At each arbor here, we have a different variety.
And this takes us out into this spectacular vegetable garden, which is really ornamental. It doesn't do it justice just to call it a vegetable garden.
Well, vegetables can be beautiful, you know.
and
we
these
have-
watering cans are handy.
Yeah, those they don't hold too much water. They certainly add a bit of whimsy to the garden, you know.
You've got a matching pair.
Yes,
So
of
you've got
course.
some symmetry.
Yes. Well, there's some symmetry in here. It's somewhat of a formal layout, but it's done in sort of an asymmetrical approach in that each bed, regardless of its shape, has a centerpiece and a grouping of plant material that stabilizes it and kind of gives it some structure. And then we plant the edible crops in the bed that's left.
What about this structure behind us, Freeland? That is a beautiful garden shed.
Yes, well, it's sort of the potting shed for the garden, but it didn't start life that way. It was originally the old well house for the well that my grandfather built. And I basically took it apart and refurbished it and created a potting shed for Sabrina.
You just have endless talents. You do construction and design and planting, and this fig is
Yes,
amazing.
yeah.
I'm not used to seeing fig trees that big.
Well, that's
the trunk is.
Yeah, it's pretty massive, actually. It's about 70 years old.
So was that original to the
That
property?
my grandmother planted that.
Your grandmother. Isn't that kind of neat that
Yeah,
your
it is.
grandmother probably harvested figs off this tree,
Yeah.
and so do you.
It's getting rather large, so I have to get a ladder to pick them, you know. But I get what's on the bottom and the birds get what's on top.
The focal point in this garden is really the watering can.
Yes.
Sort of, it's the center point, and
Yes.
everything works around it.
But then secondarily, you know, the bronze fennel, which gives you a lot of textural interest. And
Smells so good too.
it does, it's wonderful. I really like this plant. And then we have this Carex flavum, the golden carex, which contrasts nicely with the fennel. And then in front of that, we have the
Symphytum?
symphytum, yes, Axminster gold.
Look, does it keep that variegation?
Yes, it's
And it's full sun.
we're in full sun. This is weathered 98-degree weather here so far.
So this is also known as comfrey.
Comfrey, yes. But comfrey is a staple in most medicinal gardens and things like that. And then at the very bottom, to kind of tie the, again, the color echo together, with the fennel is the purple beets down there.
Beautiful. After spending the day with Freeland and Sabrina, I was inspired by their creativity and their ability to make their 1 acre of land look like a vast estate.
Truly the most pleasure I get out of this garden is watching the seasonal change. You always have something to look forward to, and that's what I look forward to in our own garden.
What it has done for our life change in our lives together, my husband and I, to take us out of jobs we weren't really happy with and to do something we truly love to do and to share it with other people, that's a lot of reward.
Although it's a great showcase for their design work, for the Tanners, the emotional satisfaction of creating and sharing their garden is its own reward. When I visit gardens, I make new friends and discover new plants. Here are some treasures from Sabrina and Freeland Tanner's garden. The Eola Sapphire Blue Hosta starts out with dark green leaves that get bluer as it ages. It grows 30 to 36 inches tall and 4 feet wide. Spikes of pale lilac flowers appear in summer. The Marjorie Fair Rose thrives when planted in a container. Its blossoms are slightly fragrant and it's very disease resistant. The golden western coltsfoot, or Petasites, is best planted in containers or it will run rampant through your garden. Its pink flowers appear in early spring before leaves emerge. Phlomis is a bold gray subshrub that's excellent for a sunny border. It needs full sun and a well-drained soil. Comfrey Axminster Gold can have leaves up to 2 feet long. In summer, blue and pale pink flowers bloom on spikes nearly 5 feet tall. It prefers sun but can tolerate part shade. If you want to be inspired, visit someone else's garden. You never know what you might find. Join us again on A Gardener's Diary.